that longtime Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has passed away. His office says he died on Saturday night after what they call a brief and sudden illness. The statement says Graham's family is asking for privacy at this time.
For nearly 30 years, Lindsey Graham lived two very different lives. One side showed a respected senator who talked about honor, friendship, and serving America. The other side left millions of people asking one painful question: what really changed him? After his passing, old speeches, private friendships, and surprising decisions are being looked at in a whole new way. The more people dig, the more confusing his story becomes. And what they are finding may completely change the way you remember Lindsey Graham. For years, Lindsey Graham looked like a man who knew exactly where he stood. He spoke with confidence. He appeared on television almost every week. He smiled, joked with reporters, and always seemed ready to answer difficult questions. To many people, he looked like a strong senator who had spent his life serving America. But the more people watched him, the more confusing he became. Some Americans remembered him as a loyal friend to Senator John McCain. They saw a man who believed in strong leadership, national security, and helping America's allies. Others remembered something very different. They saw a politician who changed in front of the whole country. They watched him criticize Donald Trump, only to later become one of Trump's strongest defenders. That is why Lindsey Graham's story still creates so many questions. Was he protecting his political career? Did he truly change his mind? Or was there another side of him that very few people understood? These questions did not appear overnight. They grew slowly, year after year. Every time people saw another speech, another interview, or another decision that did not seem to match the one before it. That is what makes this story different. This is not about one secret meeting. It is not about one hidden document. And it is not about one shocking headline. It is about something much deeper. It is about how one public figure could leave millions of people with two completely different memories. One group remembers a senator who believed in honor, friendship, and public service. Another group remembers a politician willing to make difficult political compromises to stay influential. Both groups point to real events from his public life. That is why the debate has never truly ended. Lindsey Graham spent decades in Washington. During that time, he worked with presidents from both political parties. He built friendships with people who often disagreed with him. Even some political opponents described him as warm and funny in private, despite strongly disagreeing with his public positions. That surprised many people. How could someone be praised by political opponents while also becoming one of the most criticized figures in Washington? The answer is not simple. Politics is rarely simple. People often believe every politician is either completely good or completely bad. Real life is usually more complicated. Lindsey Graham's public career became one of the clearest examples of that. As America changed, politics became more divided. Old friendships became harder to keep. Compromise became less popular. Every vote, every interview, and every speech was examined more closely than ever before. Lindsey Graham found himself standing in the middle of that change. Sometimes he defended old traditions. Sometimes he defended new political realities. To his supporters, that showed experience. To his critics, it looked like inconsistency. The same decision could be praised by one side and criticized by another. That made every new headline even more controversial. But before the arguments, before the television interviews, before the political battles, there was another story. There was a young man growing up in South Carolina who faced painful challenges long before entering Washington. Many people only know Lindsey Graham as a senator. Far fewer know the personal struggles that shaped his early life. Those early experiences helped build the man he later became. They also help explain why loyalty, survival, and responsibility became such important parts of his public image. Whether people agreed with his politics or not, very few denied that his life had been shaped by hardship at a young age. And sometimes, the hardest experiences in childhood stay with a person forever. They shape decisions. They shape relationships. They even shape the way someone responds when they face impossible choices later in life. To understand why Lindsey Graham became one of the most talked about politicians in America, we first have to understand the young man he once was. Because long before Washington, long before Donald Trump, long before the cameras followed his every move, a family tragedy changed everything. And that is where the real story begins. Long before Lindsey Graham became one of the most recognizable faces in American politics, he was simply a young boy growing up in the small town of central South Carolina. It was a quiet place where neighbors knew each other, life moved slowly, and family meant everything. From the outside, his childhood looked ordinary, but that would not last. Everything changed while Lindsey was still young. His parents became seriously ill, and within a short period, both of them passed away. Their deaths left Lindsey and his younger sister facing a future they had never imagined. Overnight, the life he knew disappeared. Most young adults are thinking about college, friends, or what career they want. Lindsey was thinking about something much different. How could he keep his family together? How could he make sure his younger sister had a safe home? Those questions forced him to grow up much faster than most people ever have to. Instead of walking away from responsibility, Lindsey stayed. He helped care for his younger sister and worked to build a stable future for both of them. Friends and people who knew his early story often pointed to this period as one of the moments that shaped his sense of duty and responsibility. No amount of money, no political title, and no public success can erase the pain of losing your parents. Many people believe that difficult moments either break a person or make them stronger. For Lindsey Graham, those painful years became the foundation of everything that came later. As time passed, he continued his education and eventually entered military service. He joined the United States Air Force, where he served as a lawyer in the Judge Advocate General's Corps. Military service became another important part of his identity. It taught discipline, structure, and the importance of making difficult decisions under pressure. For Lindsey, wearing the uniform was more than just another job. It became something he spoke about with pride throughout his political career. Military service also influenced the way he viewed the world. He believed America's national security mattered. He believed the country should support its allies. And he believed strong leadership could prevent even greater problems in the future. Those beliefs stayed with him for decades. After building his legal career, Lindsey entered politics. Like many young politicians, he believed he could make a difference. He worked hard, learned quickly, and slowly built relationships inside the Republican Party. People noticed that he was energetic. He enjoyed debates. He liked asking difficult questions. And he was rarely afraid to speak in public. Step by step, he climbed higher. Eventually, he won a seat in the United States House of Representatives. Later, he became a United States Senator representing South Carolina. For many people back home, it was an inspiring story. A young man who had faced personal tragedy had reached one of the highest offices in the country. But Washington is very different from a small town. Power changes people. Pressure changes people. And sometimes, survival changes people too. The longer Lindsey stayed in Washington, the more complicated his world became. Every day brought new political battles. Every decision created new enemies. Every vote made someone happy and someone else angry. Still, Lindsey tried to build a reputation as more than just another politician. He focused on military issues, foreign policy, and national security. He wanted to be seen as someone who understood complex international problems and who took America's role in the world seriously. That reputation opened new doors. It also introduced him to people who would change the direction of his political life forever. One of those people stood above everyone else. His name was John McCain. Their friendship became one of the strongest political partnerships in Washington. They traveled together, worked together, defended many of the same foreign policy ideas. And for years, many Americans almost thought of them as a team. Where one appeared, the other was often close behind. People who watched them believed their friendship was built on trust and shared values. Few imagined that years later, Lindsey Graham would face a political choice that would test everything that friendship seemed to stand for. That decision would become one of the biggest turning points of his entire career, and it would leave millions of Americans asking the same question: what happened to the Lindsey Graham they thought they knew? The answer begins with one man, one campaign, and one election that changed American politics forever. For many years, if people talked about Lindsey Graham, one other name almost always came up: John McCain. The two men were more than political partners. They spent years working side by side. They traveled together, appeared together on television, and shared many of the same views on America's role in the world. To many Republicans, they represented an older style of politics, one that focused on national security, military strength, and strong alliances with America's friends. Their friendship looked real. It looked strong, and many people believed nothing could ever break it. McCain was known for speaking his mind, even when it was unpopular. Lindsey Graham admired that. He often defended McCain and stood beside him during difficult political fights. For years, that partnership helped define Lindsey Graham's public image. People knew what he believed. They knew where he stood. Or at least, they thought they did. Then came the 2015 presidential campaign. A businessman named Donald Trump entered the race. At first, many politicians did not take him seriously. They believed his campaign would end quickly. But they were wrong. As Trump became more popular, the Republican Party began to change. Some politicians welcomed the change. Others were deeply worried. Lindsey Graham was one of the people who openly criticized Trump during the early days of the campaign. His words were not soft. They were direct. He questioned Trump's behavior and warned that he believed Trump could hurt the Republican Party. Those early public criticisms became some of the most widely remembered moments of Graham's career because they stood in sharp contrast to what happened later. Millions of Americans watched those interviews. Many believed Lindsey Graham would never support Donald Trump. It seemed impossible. His opinions sounded final. His criticism sounded sincere. But politics has a way of surprising people. Everything changed after the election. Donald Trump became president of the United States. The Republican Party quickly united behind its new leader. Many politicians faced a difficult choice. Should they continue fighting, or should they work with the new president? For Lindsey Graham, that decision became one of the biggest turning points of his life. Slowly, people noticed something different. The harsh criticism became less common. Public disagreements became smaller. Instead, Lindsey Graham began appearing alongside President Trump more often. They met privately. They played golf together. Television viewers saw Lindsey defending Trump during interviews. Reporters who remembered his earlier criticism were surprised. So were many voters. People started asking, what changed? Did Lindsey truly change his mind? Did he believe working with Trump would help him achieve his political goals? Or was he simply adjusting to a Republican Party that had changed around him? No one outside his closest circle could answer those questions with certainty, but everyone could see that his public image was changing. Supporters argued that good leaders must work with the president, even when they disagree. Critics believed Lindsey had abandoned the principles he once defended. Both sides believed they were right. That disagreement followed him for years. At the same time, another painful event was unfolding. John McCain became seriously ill. The senator who had stood beside Lindsey Graham for so many years was fighting one of the hardest battles of his life. As McCain's health declined, many Americans watched with sadness. Lindsey Graham stayed close to his longtime friend. He spoke warmly about McCain and often described him as someone who had shaped his own political career. When John McCain passed away, many people wondered what would happen next. The partnership that had defined so much of Lindsey Graham's career was over. The political world had changed. The Republican Party had changed. And Lindsey Graham now stood alone in a party that looked very different from the one he had joined decades earlier. Some observers believed this was the moment when his political transformation became complete. Others argued that he was simply adapting to a new reality. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. The Lindsey Graham many Americans remembered from the early 2000s no longer looked like the Lindsey Graham appearing on television during the Trump years. His critics never stopped reminding people of his earlier statements. His supporters praised him for standing with his party during difficult political battles. Every interview, every speech, every vote was now viewed through that same question. Which Lindsey Graham was the real one? The trusted ally of John McCain, or the loyal defender of Donald Trump? That question became one of the biggest debates of his public life. And it would become even more intense during the final years of his career, as new political battles, foreign policy debates, and public reactions added even more layers to his complicated legacy. As the years passed, Lindsey Graham's political life became harder to explain. To some people, he was still the senator who believed America should stand with its allies. He continued speaking about national security and warned that countries like Russia could not be ignored. On these issues, many people saw the same Lindsey Graham they had known for years. But on other issues, people saw someone completely different. That is why so many Americans felt confused. One week, he would appear beside Republican leaders, defending his party. The next week, he would work with Democratic senators on foreign policy. Some people called him practical. Others called him unpredictable. No matter which side people supported, one thing was clear. Lindsey Graham was no longer easy to understand. One of the most surprising parts of his public life was his long relationship with Joe Biden. Today, many people think politicians from different parties are always enemies, but Washington was not always like that. For many years, senators from both parties worked together on committees, traveled together, and built friendships even while arguing over important issues. Lindsey Graham and Joe Biden were part of that older political world. They disagreed on many policies. Sometimes those disagreements became heated, but they also shared years of working together inside the Senate. People who watched them closely noticed something unusual. Even after difficult political fights, they often spoke respectfully about each other as people. At one point, Lindsey Graham publicly praised Joe Biden's character, saying kind words that surprised many Republicans and Democrats alike. Those moments became well known because they showed a personal friendship existing alongside major political disagreements. To some Americans, that was a sign of maturity. To others, it was confusing. How could two politicians fight so fiercely in public and still respect each other in private? The answer goes back to an older Washington, a place where political battles did not always destroy personal friendships. But that culture was slowly disappearing. America was becoming more divided. Social media made every political disagreement feel personal. People expected leaders to choose one side and never cross the line. That made Lindsey Graham's relationships harder for many voters to understand. Then came one of the biggest international crises of the decade. Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The war shocked the world. Images of destroyed cities, frightened families, and millions of refugees filled television screens. Governments everywhere were forced to make difficult decisions. Lindsey Graham reacted quickly. He strongly supported Ukraine and argued that the United States should continue helping the country defend itself. Throughout the conflict, he repeatedly warned about the dangers posed by Vladimir Putin and supported efforts aimed at increasing pressure on Russia. Many people praised his position. They believed America should stand with its allies. Others believed the United States should focus more on problems at home. Once again, Lindsey Graham stood in the middle of a political argument that divided the country. Even inside the Republican Party, opinions were changing. Some Republicans wanted continued support for Ukraine. Others questioned whether America should remain deeply involved. Lindsey Graham stayed firm. He continued speaking about the importance of helping Ukraine. For supporters, this showed consistency. They believed he had stayed loyal to the foreign policy beliefs he had held for many years. For critics, it created another contradiction. They asked how someone could strongly defend America's allies overseas while also supporting political decisions at home that they believed weakened democratic institutions. Those questions followed him everywhere. Television interviews became tougher. Political debates became louder. Every appearance created new headlines. Still, Lindsey Graham rarely stepped away from the spotlight. He continued appearing on Sunday news programs. He continued answering reporters' questions. He continued defending his decisions. Whether people agreed with him or not, few could deny that he remained one of the most visible senators in Washington. That visibility came with a price. Every old speech was compared to every new speech. Every past statement was placed beside every current interview. The internet never forgot. Supporters pointed to his decades of experience. Critics pointed to his political changes. Both sides believed the facts supported their view. As time passed, Lindsey Graham's legacy became less about one vote or one speech. Instead, it became about a much larger question. Can a politician change with changing times? Or does too much change become impossible to explain? That question stayed with Lindsey Graham until the final years of his career. And after his death, it became even louder. Old interviews resurfaced. Old friendships were discussed again. Old political decisions were judged through a completely different lens. Some people remembered his kindness. Others remembered his political choices. Both memories existed at the same time, and together they created one of the most debated legacies in modern American politics. But perhaps the biggest debate was still waiting. Because after his death, people across America and across the internet began asking a final question. How should Lindsey Graham really be remembered? The answer depended on which version of his life people believed mattered most. Death has a strange way of changing the conversation. While a public figure is alive, every decision can still be explained. Every interview can be followed by another interview. Every mistake can be defended, corrected, or replaced by something new. But after death, the story stops growing. Only the record remains. That is exactly what happened with Lindsey Graham. The moment he was gone, people across America began looking back at his life. News reports, old interviews, speeches, and political decisions were shared again. Everyone seemed to have the same question. Who was Lindsey Graham, really? The answers were very different. Some people remembered a man who dedicated most of his adult life to public service. They pointed to his years in the Air Force, his work in the Senate, and his focus on national security. They believed he spent decades trying to protect America's interests, even when the choices were difficult. Others saw a completely different picture. They remembered the senator who once warned Republicans about Donald Trump, but later became one of Trump's closest allies. To them, that change became the defining story of his career. Neither side was willing to give up its view. That is why the debate grew even louder after his death. Television networks discussed his political legacy. Political leaders released statements. Former colleagues shared personal memories. Supporters praised his loyalty, experience, and commitment to national security. Critics questioned many of his political choices and wondered whether he had sacrificed too much to remain close to power. Then another debate began. Many people noticed how different the public tributes were. Some remembered Lindsey Graham as a loyal friend who treated people with kindness behind the scenes. Others focused almost entirely on his political record. Both reactions appeared at the same time. That showed something important. People were not remembering the same man. They were remembering different parts of the same life. That is why his legacy became so difficult to define. One person remembered his friendship with John McCain. Another remembered his work with Joe Biden on Senate issues. Someone else remembered his strong support for Ukraine. Another remembered his loyalty to Donald Trump. Every memory pointed to a real part of his public career. Together, they created a picture that was far more complicated than a simple hero or villain. As the days passed, old rumors about Lindsey Graham also returned to social media. Some internet users repeated long-running personal speculation, while others argued that unverified claims should not define a person's legacy. His public record, political decisions, and documented statements remained the strongest evidence for understanding his career. That became another reminder of how quickly online conversations can shift after someone dies. Facts, opinions, rumors, and emotions can all become mixed together. But history usually asks a bigger question. Not, was this person perfect? Instead, what impact did this person leave behind? For Lindsey Graham, that question may never have one simple answer. He served South Carolina for many years. He influenced important debates on military policy and foreign affairs. He built close friendships across party lines. He also made political decisions that remain deeply controversial. Some Americans believe he stayed close to power so he could influence difficult decisions from inside the room. Others believe that staying close to power slowly changed him. Those two ideas continue to shape the conversation about his life. Maybe that is why Lindsey Graham's story still matters today. It is not only about one senator. It is about how politics can test loyalty, friendship, beliefs, and personal values. It asks a difficult question that reaches far beyond one person. Can someone protect their principles while trying to survive in politics? Or does survival slowly become more important than the principles themselves? Every viewer may answer that question differently. That is what makes Lindsey Graham's legacy so powerful. Not because everyone agrees, but because almost no one does. Years from now, people will still study his speeches. They will still debate his decisions. They will still compare the Lindsey Graham of the early years with the Lindsey Graham of the Trump era. And they will probably continue asking the same question. Which version was the real Lindsey Graham? Perhaps the truth is more complicated than either side wants to admit. Perhaps he was a man who changed with the political world around him. Perhaps he stayed the same in some ways and changed in others. History often refuses to fit into simple headlines. And maybe that is the biggest lesson of all. Lindsey Graham's life was filled with difficult choices, strong friendships, political victories, painful criticism, and decisions that millions of Americans will continue debating for years to come. Whether people admire him or disagree with him, one thing is clear. His story became part of a much larger story about modern American politics. And that conversation is far from over. What do you think? Was Lindsey Graham a leader who adapted to survive in a changing political world? Or do you believe his biggest political decisions changed the way history will remember him? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy deep stories about the lives, controversies, and lasting legacies of America's most influential public figures, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary.